Bella Abzug when she was in Congress, okay, to name it Women's Equality Day, August 26th, 1920 was when the 19th Amendment was physically added to the Constitution. Now you may hear about August 18 sometimes, and that's the date in Tennessee when they ratified the 19th Amendment, but it took from August 26th, August 18, all the way to the 26th to get it added to the Constitution. I see some historians nodding. I'm hoping I'm getting this right. I'm the amateur historian. My name is Freddie Kay, and I am the founder and president of the Massachusetts Women's History Center. And I really thank all of you for coming. So we are pleased and honored to co-host and plan today's event with the following organizations. And please visit their tables if you haven't already. We have the Greater Boston section of the National Council of Negro Women. Dr. Lee Michael will be speaking in a little while. We're so glad she's here. And Mary Howard, the Vice President-elect of membership. 18 is the President-elect, and the outgoing President is here as well. Lisa, thank you for coming. The League of Women Voters of Massachusetts, Susan Garvey, is with us, Fiona Schultz, and they have a voter information table with us, which is very important, and we're so glad they're here. The City of Boston, Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement, and Dana Alice, who is their new executive director, and Hallie Smith, Program Manager, and some others. So thank you so much. Thank you. Also, we are so honored that Boston City Councilor for District 8 is here with us today, Sharon Durkin, and she represents this district that we are in. I also want to thank Councilor Ed Flynn. Where's Councilor Flynn? Thank you for coming. There we go. Thank you so much, Councilor Flynn, for coming. And Steve Kenny, our colleague of many years with the Commonwealth Museum. So glad he's with us here today, and each of you. So glad to see some nice kids here today, all the way from New York. I know them too. Thank you for coming. Lots of kids. And I want to say for the Mass Women's History Center, thank you to Maureen Hansen, who couldn't be with us today, but she had a lot to do with the many things going on today. Pat O'Halloran, our administrative associate, managing our table today, waiting for us. Cherise Thompson, who's behind. We have Facebook Live going on. Thank you, Cherise. Kevin Gilnack, one of our consultants, and his son, who's joining us today as well. And our volunteers, Cheryl Dubin, Jennifer Lynch, Nancy Rayshak, Sarah Rubin, Eileen Ryan, Boston Indigenous land that we're on. Here in Boston, we are standing on the indigenous land of the Massachusetts, Nampeg and Pawtucket peoples, who have stewarded this land for hundreds of generations. Native American governance structures included critical roles for Native women, and early suffragists in upstate New York learned much from them. Also, indigenous women were active in the women's suffrage movement in the United States, despite knowing that adoption of the 19th Amendment would not enable them to vote because they were not considered citizens, but they worked hard for the 19th Amendment nonetheless. In 1924, the Indian Citizenship Act granted U.S. citizenship to Native Americans. But since Congress allowed each state to choose who had the right to vote, it took another 40 years for Native Americans in all states across the country to obtain the right to vote in the United States. We encourage everyone to reflect on these injustices as we discuss the history of women's rights and the continued fight to increase voting access to more citizens of this country. I'm getting chills. We know it's a really important issue today. I also want to mention that example of indigenous people is relevant to many groups because when the 19th Amendment was adopted, and the 19th Amendment does not discriminate, it requires that there be discrimination on the basis of sex. But other laws prevented many people from voting, including indigenous people, African Americans, Asian Americans who were not considered citizens, etc. And those laws needed to change. And really, well, we used to say it culminated with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, but unfortunately, it continues, the fight continues. So after over 13 years of commemorating this suffrage movement as Suffrage 100 Massachusetts, this past March, Suffrage 100 MA became the Massachusetts Women's History Center. So we built on our foundation, if you will, of suffrage and expanding to all of women's history in Massachusetts. And please go online if you haven't been yet, where we have exhibits, articles, biographies, and much more. There's an Olympics exhibit that's timely that you might enjoy, going all the way back to the early 1900s of women in this state who participated in the Olympics, and so much more. So we hope someday to have a brick and mortar. We don't yet, but we hope so that we will. So since we began doing this event with the city of Boston in 2011 is when we started, and I did have somebody ask, why the swan boat? That's a good question. The answer is that Mayor Menino, may he rest in peace, wanted to honor the swan boat because it's a private organization. And our group and the Boston Women's Heritage Trail and others wanted to celebrate Women's Equality Day. So we combined the two, and we met down there right next to the swan boat. And what we learned, which was really amazing, is there's a feminist story about the swan boat. Who knew that the man who started the swan boats in the late 1800s, he got his permit, he launched his boat, he was out for 1 year and suddenly died in his 40s, leaving his wife a widow with 4 children and no income. And so Julia Paget, persisted. The business community in Boston said, oh no, women cannot run businesses, that's not allowed. She persevered, she had to get signatures, do all kinds of things for 30 years, and her great-granddaughter today, Lynn Paget, and her cousin Phil, run the swan boat. So you know, yes, this is Julia Paget. And as you will notice, the swan boats are wearing their Votes for Women sashes, which we so appreciate every year. Those were made by a teacher from Needham High School many, many years ago, and they put them on every year for us, which we so appreciate. And I'm hoping Lynn Paget might be here today. We hope that she'll stop by. I want to mention that our theme for this year, which comes from the National Women's Alliance out of California, is the importance of voting, and also women who advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion. As we address this theme this year, I want to take a moment to answer the question, why do we come together for Women's Equality Day? And we are here as a community to recognize and honor the women, including many women of color and men and non-conforming gender people who fought hard for 72 plus years so that women could vote. Remember, when women could not vote, they were required to live under the laws adopted by men and pay taxes. And that's true for all these minority groups similarly, had to live under the laws that they had no say in adopting. The founding fathers, and let's be clear, they were all men, and even Abigail Adams' eloquent plea to her husband that men remember the ladies was dismissed by her husband, who said, depend upon it, we know better than to repeal our masculine systems. So we have persevered nonetheless. So how did women get the right to vote? These were radical, brave women over decades who persisted. They ended up being jailed for peacefully voting. They were force-fed. And so we want to thank them for their sacrifice so that we could vote. And I'll note that the last women in the country who were jailed for the vote were jailed down the street at the Charles Street Jailhouse, February 1919. So we honor this day and thank the fearless women for fighting so that we can have the vote, and let's use it. And the dates are going to be coming up later this morning. I want to mention it particularly because of our theme that NWHC is committed to honoring, to uplifting the many women of color who worked so hard for the vote, even if they thought they wouldn't benefit from it directly, including Josephine St. Pierre Ruffin, Mariah Baldwin from Cambridge, and many, many women who we need to amplify so that people learn about them. I will also say that this coming week, we have a new article coming out on our website by our curator, Mariana Brandman, the Combahee River Collective, which was an organization of black women in Boston, most of whom openly identified as lesbians. The CRC played a critical role in the liberation movements of the 1970s, advocating for a new form of revolutionary politics that addressed multiple interlocking forms of oppression, including racism, sexism, homophobia, and capitalism. Their groundbreaking analysis of identity politics and international feminism was called the Combahee River Collective Statement from 1977, and it continues to influence social justice advocates worldwide. We will be posting this article coming up this week, so please stay tuned and watch our social media for our announcements. There are so many people to thank. I want to mention that at this time last year, we did this event co-hosted with our bodies ourselves, talked about maternal health care, and many issues were raised, and I'm so thrilled that today, check your watches, the governor is signing into law to honor this maternal health care. Congratulations to the legislature and the governor for that wonderful thing. So now I'm honored and pleased to introduce Dana Alice, the new Executive Director of the City of Boston Office of Women's Advancement. Dana Alice. Good afternoon. I'm so new. On my very first day, one of the first calls I got was from Freddie, and I said, I can't wait to be there. So, welcome. First, let me say thank you to the Massachusetts Women's History Center for inviting us all here to commemorate this day and for upholding this history and this legacy here in the state of Massachusetts. Again, I'm Dana Alice, the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office for Women's Advancement in the City of Boston. And as we gather today to celebrate women's equality, I'm reminded of the progress we've made and the challenges that still lie ahead. And this historical achievement of the right to vote was not merely a legal milestone. It was the culmination of nearly a century of tireless advocacy and activism by courageous women like many of the women that are here today. I'm deeply honored to be entrusted with leading the Mayor's Office for Women's Advancement as we continue to champion the rights and opportunities for all women in Boston. And on this day, it's important to recognize that our work is far from over. We must continue to fight for economic equity, representation, and the health and safety for all women. And I know a little bit about that. I've come to the office with experience in the labor movement for over 20 years, specifically with healthcare workers. And my experience is standing shoulder to shoulder with women that provide care to us from every stage of our lives. I was able to witness what happens when women vote and when women move. And when we vote and we educate our families, friends, and our neighbors, we change things and we make improvements for everyone. We raise wages. We change laws. We protect our rights, our bodies, and our communities. This is why our office will continue to expand support for working women and girls, advancing menstrual equity, and promoting economic mobility to meet the evolving needs of all women and gender nonconforming individuals in our city of Boston. Our Extraordinary Women series highlights women that do this work in the city of Boston and their contributions. and our recent menstrual equity pilot that we look to expand, offer free menstrual products, and our women's votes will play a pivotal role in shaping the future of our communities and our nation. The ability to vote is not just a right, it's a powerful tool for change. And when we exercise this right to voice our concerns, influence policies, we ensure that our needs and perspectives are represented. So let's use this day as a reminder to continue pushing for equality, not just in words, but in action. And together we can build a Boston where equality is not just an aspiration or reality for everyone. Thank you. Where's Haley? Do we have Haley here? Come on up. We're going a little bit out of order on the program, but I'm so pleased to introduce Haley, sorry, program manager, right? Who's going to read a proclamation from our mayor. Hello, everyone. Hello, and happy Women's Holiday. And I'm so excited to read this on behalf of our mayor, Michelle Wu. So, proclamation. Whereas the first women's rights convention in Seneca Falls, New York in 1848 adopted the Declaration of Sentiments, including seeking the right to vote for women, and whereas the first and second National Women's Rights Conventions took place in 1850 and 1851 at Brindley Hall in Worcester, Massachusetts, and whereas suffrage protests drew 500,000 spectators to Boston's Back Bay on October 16, 1915, and on May 2nd, 1914, 200,000 to 300,000 spectators to Boston's Tremont Street. Nonetheless, on November 2nd, 1915, Massachusetts men defeated universal suffrage by a 2-to-1 margin, and whereas Massachusetts was the 8th state to rectify the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, June 25th, 1919, guaranteeing women the right to vote. And whereas August 26, 2024 marks the 104th anniversary of the addition of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and whereas other laws needed to change to enable Native Americans, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, African Americans to vote, and whereas the Massachusetts Women's History Center, the Greater Boston section of National Council of Negro Women, the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts, and the Boston Office of Mayor's Office for Women's Advancement are closed. And Women's Equality Day Inc., August 26, 2024, in the Public Garden, Boston, Massachusetts, and our theme this year, the importance of voting, and women advocate for equality, for equity, diversity, and inclusion. Now, therefore, on behalf of Mayor Michelle Wu of the City of Boston, do hereby declare August 26, 2024 to be Women's Equality Day in the City of Boston. Thank you, Haley. And now I am pleased to call up from the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts, Susan Garvey, who's the Director of Development, and her colleague with her together. So,
well, what a lovely segue this is, because the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts was established in 1920. That's 104 years ago, just months before the 19th Amendment was ratified, granting women the right to vote. It was created to help women exercise their newly won voting rights and to engage them in the political process. The League of Women Voters of Massachusetts is a nonpartisan organization, which means we do not endorse or oppose any political party or candidate. No matter what you hear, we do not. We do advocate for public policies like voting rights, campaign finance reform, healthcare, and the environment. We are fully committed to diversity, equality, and inclusion in principle and practice, as they are central to our current and future success in engaging more perfect democracy. How do we do this? We organize debates. We distribute voter guides. We work to increase voter education of the electoral process and participation. We work with our gateway city partners and friends. We work with people like Freddie Kay and her organization and the new organization she's continually introduces us to and we partner with because we're just better together. And Freddie knows that and we know that and we appreciate that. We believe that every citizen has a vote and a voice and they need to be heard. And we can't do it alone. So I ask you if you would consider joining and becoming a member of the League in the community where you work or where you live. If you do, you will instantly belong to a network organized on a national, state, and local level. Now this allows us to address both community-specific issues and the broader national concerns. We stay connected to those communities we serve. So please take our brochure. And you'll see on the back a QR code. It takes you instantly to our website. You can take a look. If you're interested, give us a call. We'll set you up with members from the community in which you live that you would like to meet, and we'll get you on board. It's really as simple as that. With that said, I want to thank Freddie for having us here today, for being one of our most cherished partners. And together, we're excited for what lies ahead. We don't dread it. We look forward to it because we have the information we need to make informed voting be what we do. And with that said, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Fiona Schultz, and let her tell you a little bit more about Vote 411. Thank you, Susan. So as Susan mentioned, voter engagement and voter education has been our bread and butter for over 100 years. That certainly does not change during the election cycle. Vote 411 is our online voter guide that we have been working on all summer in hopes of sharing with Massachusetts citizens and being able to educate you on polling places that are going to be in your area, races that are happening in your district, and candidates that will be on your ballot. Users are able to enter their address to get personalized voting information tailored just to them. This summer we've done outreach with candidates and have encouraged them to educate voters through responding to our questionnaires that will be available on Vote 411, where people can educate themselves on where the candidates in their district stand on the issues. We also publicize league-sponsored candidate forums across the state in your local communities that give candidates equal opportunity to educate voters on where they stand. Throughout the election cycle, we will also be having a presence in communities across the state via voter engagement tables, registration, and information at polling places. We try to pursue DEI principles throughout our different materials by translating these into different languages that, in order to get information to reach the people that we're trying to. Our mission as an organization has remained the same over 100 years, educating voters. We seek to benefit all citizens in Massachusetts, regardless of gender identity, racial background, political party, etc. We hope that you'll visit vote411.org/Massachusetts to educate yourself this election cycle to see what is happening in your district. Finally, as Susan mentioned, we are always looking for passionate Massachusetts voters who are interested in our mission, and we hope that you will join us. Today is actually the deadline to request your mail-in ballot for the Massachusetts primary happening a week from tomorrow. So if you're considering voting remotely, please request that ballot. And you can still register to vote for the general election happening in November. Thank you.
so much. And I'm really glad you talked about the league forming just a few months before the 19th Amendment was adopted. They were optimistic that it was going to happen, not knowing it would come down to one vote in Tennessee. But it did. So now I'm very honored to introduce Dr. Adine Lattimore. Did I say that right? I'm so sorry. Adine is the new president-elect of the Greater Boston section of the National Council of Negro Women. We have Mary with us today, and Lisa, who's the outgoing president, and I think Lisa Klein, maybe I saw. So there we go. Thank you all for coming, and Dr. Lattimore, thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to recognize the other folks that are here with me today, the members of the Mass Women's History Center, the Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement, City Council members, League of Women Voters, other officials, and friends. My name, again, is Adine Lattimore, and I am the president-elect for the Greater Boston section of the National Council of Negro Women. I want to recognize the president right now, Lisa Braxton, who is in our midst today, who comes to support me along with other members of the organization. It's my pleasure to be here today to bring a message from the local and the national organization. We call it NCNW, the National Council of Negro Women. We are proud and honored to be a partner organization of the Massachusetts Women's History Center, engaging the public about the fight for equality is a mission that GBS and CNW also believes in and works toward in our program and events. The members of GBS and CNW, Greater Boston section of the National Council of Negro Women, feel, along with most of you, that voting is not only a privilege but a right. As women, we have earned the right to vote and we have our wishes and wants known. We cannot sit there and wait for someone else to have the vote in our state. This is our time now more than ever. We cannot allow someone to dictate what we will do with our bodies, with what books we're allowed to have in our schools, and where we can live, work, or vote. The struggle was and still is real. We have come too far to give up now. We can't become apathetic, unconcerned, and unemotional. We have come a long way as women, especially as black women. For some history, and you heard it earlier, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was passed in 1920. That amendment granted women the right to vote. However, many states passed laws that discriminated against African American women, limiting their freedom. And there were other barriers preventing many black women from voting. Some of these barriers included a poll tax. That was a tax levied on everyone, regardless of your income. If you could not pay that, you could not vote. Literacy tests. And these tests were administered by white clerks at the polls who could pass or fail a person at their discretion, and usually was based on race. And of course, violence, threats, and intimidation. Black women continue to fight for their rights. Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, educator, clubwoman, and stateswoman, and founder of the National Council of Negro Women in 1935, asserted the universality of equality in and through all things. Her contributions to the women's suffrage movement were evidenced in her rhetoric challenging American society to become a true democracy, as well as her utilization of institutional spaces to plan, strategize, and allocate resources. Dr. Bethune's activism through her school's sprawling social engagement also provided interracial space for secret meetings and suffrage work. Mary McLeod Bethune formed the National Council of Negro Women to pursue civil rights. Tens of thousands of African American women worked many decades with other activists such as Fannie Lou Hamer and Diane Nash that succeeded in getting the Voting Rights Act passed in 1965. So for me, that was like yesterday. For the kids, my grandkids, it was the 1900s, and they think it was so far, in the past. So it was recent. I keep telling them that was recent. As a child, I recall talking to my mom about voting.
really didn't know what it all meant. And I remember her saying to me, if you want to be heard, you need to vote. If you want to be taken seriously, you need to vote. Our people, our ancestors died for the right to vote, so I must remember that. She never missed an election, and neither will I right now. We want to encourage you to step up and step up. Be a testimony in the middle of this test. Do the work. NCNW has provided our members with voting sites and information to educate themselves and others. There are sites which allow you to register to vote and inform your deadlines, explain ballot issues, countdown to voting, finding poll locations, and other information related to voting. We put out a statement recently with 100 days remaining until the 2024 election, less than that now. The goal of NCNW remains the same: to continue to register new voters and employ our straight strategy to get out the vote. We ask that all NCNW members, affiliates, and friends join us to ensure that the voices of all Americans are heard during this historic election season. If you are not tuned into the work of preserving our democracy, now is the time to join. Pay attention and do not be distracted by the rhetoric. As Oprah Winfrey said, let us choose common sense over nonsense and get out the vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean. That was awesome. I will mention quickly and come back to it that I had the honor of joining the CSNCNW on a trip to Washington, where we went to New York City and then to D.C. And I learned something on that trip that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes and how it might be something for all of us. But now, it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Boston City Councilor Sharon Durkin. Sharon and I go back a ways. Another lot. I don't live in this district. I wish I did. But we really appreciate this. Is something that didn't come together to the very end, so I'm really sorry she's not in our program, but we really appreciate you coming. Thank you.
And let's give a clap for Freddie for all that she does. I first got to know Freddie because she was hounding me about elections that I worked for. She wanted them all to come to the anniversary of women's suffrage. She has been so important in the way that she's really furthered the way that we talk about suffrage in Boston, and she's made sure that it's always at the top of our minds. So thank you so much, Freddie. So I think when it comes to voting, there are two times where I realized how much voting mattered to me. When I was in college, I went to Smith College. The second I turned 18, I registered to vote. I wanted to vote in every election, and I'm from Georgia originally, so I remember, looking up how to register to vote, looking up how to get in my mail-in ballot, and I remember getting mailed something back. We didn't count your vote. It arrived too late. It arrived too late in the mail for it to be counted in Georgia. That was one of my first elections that I ever voted in. It was one of the most important elections in Georgia. But I think we hear this phrase all the time. The stakes are big. The stakes are big. This election is more important than ever. But every election is important. There are stakes in every election. When I ran, I had to run for city council twice in 6 months. I got elected in a special election last July. It was sort of the inverse of that experience of your vote wasn't counted. I had people coming up to me and saying, I just voted for you. And that feeling of people supporting you and knowing that your vision for your district is the one that they want to support. I think of those experiences as voting as polar opposites. So, like, your vote wasn't counted, I voted for you. I've been on both ends of that. But we know for a lot of people, their access to voting is, we know that in states like Georgia, where I'm from, they are clearing the voter rolls. And by the way, I had to call Georgia to get my name off of the voter rolls. So they're clearing some people from the voting rolls really fast and at alarming rates. But my vote, I was still a Georgia, essentially, I had to call them to get removed from the Georgia voting rolls. So the stakes could not be more important in this election, but they're important in every single election. And I think when I think about the most, I think about women's history, and I think about getting the chance when I was in college to meet Gloria Steinem, and a Smithy, just like me, and what that meant for like my trajectory and like getting involved with women's rights. I see a lot of people here who have done so much work and spent so much time organizing and reading the history and getting involved, and we've all had those moments of aha moments of like, oh, this is the reason I'm able to vote. Oh, this is the reason I have the rights that I have. I know I'm not supposed to talk about the convention, but I'll just talk about it in one instance. I was just there last week. And I know we want to stay out of politics and supporting candidates in our remarks, but one thing I noticed about the convention is how at ease the Massachusetts delegates were and what we were talking about compared to what delegates from other states were talking about. And that's because the leadership that we have at the local and state level, we feel secure in our rights. But all over the country, that's not the case. We heard different speeches from different, and it was just night and day what our delegation was talking about versus what people across the country were talking about. But we need to care as much about people in Arkansas as we do about ourselves. We need to care as much about what happens in Georgia as what happens in Massachusetts. And we need to make sure that women have the resources and they have the information to get out and flex their vote. It is more important than ever, but again, every single election is important. A lot of people know this, but I was a political fundraiser and organizer before I ran for city council. And I remember, doing outreach for down ballot and doing outreach for the top of the ticket. And the responses and the tenor in which people responded to you and the cadence people responded to you when they were on the other end of the phone when you were calling them for a candidate they didn't recognize. We need to organize at all levels, and make sure that even elections that may not seem as important to the person on the other end of the phone, that they know there's an election, because it matters. Every single election matters. And I'll just close with this. You don't know what decisions are going to matter to you until those decisions in government are made. You don't know which rights you are blessed to have until they're taken away. You don't know, you might not be of an identity that is the most marginalized. You might not personally be someone who's trans. You might not have a trans child, but someone you know does. And when those rights are gone, you're going to hear from that person that's in your community, that's in your neighborhood. And we, as women, I think women's history is Native history, women's history is Black history, women's history is Asian American history, women's history is all of these histories. Women's history is also trans history. We have to get ourselves to the point of, we are the perfect group to get up to the point of knowledge of like knowing everything, because our communities are going to need us as a resource. Our communities are going to need all of the groups associated with this event as a resource for knowing more about when the elections are. And I'll just add, I represent a lot of colleges and universities, 14 colleges and universities in Boston. I have West End, Beacon Hill, Back Bay, Fenway, Mission Hill. And it's a shame that people who are moving in on September 1 will not be able to vote the next day. That is a shame. And we need to fix that. So as much as our advocacy goes, other states are figuring out how to do same-day voter registration. We are disenfranchising students in the city of Boston right now. So as we think about the fights that are ahead, that may be one of them that we want to take on. So I'd like to invite my colleague in government, Councillor Ed Flynn, to give us a citation.
Thank you, Councilor Durkin. I'm honored to be here with you and some of these city officials as well from Mayor Wu's staff. But I also wanted to recognize a friend that I've known for many years that continues to invite me to this event. And I always try to be here because she's such a wonderful person. Every time I come to this event, I'm learning more and more about women's rights. But I want to say thank you, Freddie, for always including me. And I just wanted to highlight one point. The election soon will be here in another 2 months. And not only will the two presidential candidates be on the ballot, but women's rights will be on the ballot, civil rights, disability rights, labor rights, environmental justice rights, public education support as well. So there's a lot at stake over the next 2 months. These next 2 months will probably have an impact on the next 30 years in this country, in my opinion. But let me read this citation from myself and Councilor Durkin. It's to the Massachusetts Women's History Center. Your unwavering dedication and tireless efforts in advancing women's equality in the city of Boston and across Massachusetts. Thank you for sharing the ever important stories of suffrages for us. You have shown a light and recognized the contributions of women activists from throughout the Commonwealth over the last 100 years. Your enthusiasm and civic light upholds the values and traditions of activists of our time and before us. We honor your commitment and hard work. Thank you and congratulations.
I want to give a shout out to Pat Klein from the National Political Caucus. And I'm sure there are many other groups that are here. I apologize if I'm not recognizing them. Please come up. Before we close, a couple of, oh my gosh. Charlie Gola-Ritchie, thank you. Lots of, yes, Charlie Gola-Ritchie. A couple of things. So I hope I thanked our wonderful volunteers and everybody who made this possible. On the back of your programs, there's a thank you list. The City of Boston, Parks and Recreation were very important to this happening, and so many other people. Very happy that we have Rosalind here who's on our board. Rosalind, you give a shout out. She's on our board, really appreciate her being here, and so many others of you have been long-time supporters. Before we close, or as we close, I'm going to ask, we want to take a group photo, our annual group photo with this wonderful view behind us. So we're going to gather over here, we're going to put a few chairs together. Is there anything else I've forgotten? Thank you so much for coming and for making this an important day where we can all recognize these incredible women and men who made this happen and the work that they want us to continue doing. I know what I forgot to say, because there's a song about Keep Marching. And that song is from the show in New York called Subs. Yes, and it's short for suffragist. And we are working, that's what I was thinking on our trip to New York, and I know some other people have some skill at this. We're going to try to make a trip to New York with a bus and get seats so that we can all go see stuff together. Some of us have had the privilege of seeing it. We want to go again, so let's do that. Thank you all so much, and have a great day. Thanks for coming. Privileges which belong to them as citizens of the United States, and whereas women and men of all races persisted for nearly a century struggling against violence and discrimination to win the right of women to vote, and whereas the 19th Amendment to the Constitution, ratified in 1920, states, quote, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. And whereas Congress in 1973 designated August 26th, the date of the 19th Amendment, was certified as Women's Equality Day, and whereas the Commonwealth of Massachusetts recognizes Women's Equality Day as a celebration of the success of the women's suffrage movement and the ongoing efforts to secure and expand equal rights, equal opportunity, full civic inclusion, and human dignity to all residents of the United States. Now, therefore, I, Mara Healey, Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, do proclaim August 26th to be Women's Equality Day. Signed by the Lieutenant Governor as well, and the Secretary of the Commonwealth, Francis Galvin. Thank you so much. Happy Women's Equality Day.